Today, Paul George mentioned that this was a one-year experiment.
The initial plan was to give it another year, see what we could do. I did that, we played another year.
Was that something that you knew ahead of time? And is that also something that you're worried about becoming the, I guess, the trend for people who, free agents who come to Oklahoma City?
Well, let me first start off by saying, I think the world of PG. I think everybody knows that. I know that he had used the term mutual. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because that would infer that we were wanting to trade Paul George, which I think most people would agree that probably wasn't on the top of our off-season priority list. I would say that it was not adversarial at all, and I also fully respect the way that it was handled. And the fact that we were able to make it work in a way that benefited the franchise, made it something that we could do. But and I would also say that we were excited about heading into the season, with some of the additions that we made. Shortly after free agency began, things changed a little bit. The players have the freedom to be able to talk and recruit, and there's nothing limiting that. And that obviously changed the game for us. But I feel really good about the fact that we were able to make it work for everybody and figure out a solution, because based on just looking down the runway, we were probably going to be faced with that scenario. Probably after the following season. He would have had 1 year left on his contract at that point in time. Although we may have had more time to plan, I don't think we were going to be in a position to be able to recoup the value that we were able to in that particular situation.
Well, Paul used the word, time's up yesterday. Time was up in regard to both of you all kind of understanding that, the organization and Paul. And then he also used the word stagnant. How do you feel about him using those particular words to describe what happened here?
The time was up. Felt like we were just stagnant.
I love PG, and I would never tell him or necessarily, I don't know the context of how that was said, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think at some point, the opportunity for him to play with Kawhi, at least this is what was expressed to me. I can't. Opportunity to play with Kawhi, opportunity to go back to LA, were the things that were the biggest, factor in this for him. And we understand that, and we were able to make the most of the situation. As I said before, I thought that, coming into this season, we probably had another year to really try to, have a really good year and add on to kind of I thought coming back into the year with some of the additions that we made, and Dre coming back, I thought we'd be in, position to be like we've been in the past, in and around 50-something wins. I think we've averaged 52.5 wins over the last 10 years. So something in that range, and with an opportunity, if we stay healthy, to make some progress. But again, when the situation developed in July, that was the first we had heard of that. It was our job to figure out how to manage that from there versus look down the line and be pretty pragmatic about, well, are we ever going to be in this position again to be able to capitalize in this fashion? And it just made business sense for us to look at it hard.
There was reported discontent from Russell and Paul in the off season. From what you know, where does that discontent stem from?
Again, I just can't get into whatever the speculation is, or I just could tell you this. I don't know how many people in the NBA are contented at the end of a season. And I don't know what the discontent is referring to. I don't know, is a pancakes not fluffy enough, or we're not winning enough games? You're not giving me anything to really work with. Other I can tell you, those guys are great guys. We're going to have conversations with those guys at the end of the year. When you don't reach the potential that you think you have as a team, there's going to be frustration, of course. But I think all systems were going into the season. We're excited about it, but that's just not the path that it took, and I feel really good about the way that we were able to handle that from that point. But this comment of what you're referring to, like, I don't know what that means, and I don't know how many. I don't know how to categorize that.
Was there an understanding once Paul moved on, immediate understanding between the team and Russell that you guys would work on moving?
I mean, I think when these types of changes happen, like you're always first thing that I want to try to lay out is that conversations with players and agents happen all the time. Like, these aren't isolated conversations. It's just because there's some event that takes place after the fact. I think there's a lot of attention paid to the fact that, like, these conversations are happening all the time at the end of the season, and it's very natural. We have good relationships with the guys. So, but when there's something like that taking shape with the franchise, I think you sit down, and I think it's a good conversation to have, especially with someone like Russell, who has the tenure here. Obviously, Houston was the place he wanted to go, and we were able to find a way to accomplish our goals and his. If we couldn't accomplish our goals, then we wouldn't have traded him to Houston. But we were able to find a way and communicate through that process to get that to happen. But to answer your question, you sit down. Where are we going from here? Where are you with things right now? And I think he and the organization came to the same conclusion that, hey, if there's something that makes sense for everybody, then we'll look at that for sure. And we're fortunate that it worked out the way that it did.
Did you consider denying the trade request from Paul?
Well, I mean, the reason that we were able to find a way to do it was because of what we were able to get back. I wouldn't say that we were going to appease the request simply because it was made, but more than anything, it was because of the fact that we were able to get the return that we did, which then allowed us to accommodate what he was looking for as well. So yeah, no, it wasn't necessarily a permission. It was, how can we make this work for everyone? And the reality is we've seen these situations in other cities, and I just don't think for us we can take that risk, given the lengths that we had gone to try to keep the run that we've started in 2008 together. One more year without everybody being totally on board, knowing that we could be faced with the exact same situation. From a business perspective, from a practical perspective, it would be irresponsible not to look at that opportunity, and it worked out. I think one of the things I'm most happy about is we were able to accomplish our goals. Paul was able to accomplish what it is that he was looking to try to achieve, and there's no adversarial or animosity between parties at all.
Sam, this morning, the issue of player-to-player tampering has kind of come up in the last few weeks. Just from your perspective as GM, what's your stance on that, and what are your views on that moving forward?
Well, I mean, again, it's probably more of a league question. The only thing I would say is that there's nothing that prevents that from taking place. If there's nothing to prevent it from taking place, then I don't see a way or the reason why we should be up in arms about it. It's really more a question for the league office and how they want to handle it. But players should be free to have conversations, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, like, it's our job to adjust and adapt to the situations that are presented to us. And as I said before, we were able to find a way to make that work for everybody, given the circumstances. And maybe it was a year earlier than we had anticipated, having to look at some of these harder things. But how it comes about, that's really not my expertise. My job is to try to problem solve those things from there.
Do you anticipate that becoming an issue at the next CBA?
I don't know. I don't. The last thing I want to do is speculate on all that type of stuff. Again, I think it's fair to say that we've seen the effect that these types of things can happen, that can have on franchises, and you have to do that calculus for yourself as to if you want to put yourself in that position once these trade requests come in. But as I said, and I can't stress this enough, I thought PG handled himself well with us professionally, and we were able to make the most of the situation because of the relationships that did exist, that do exist. We truly wish him the best of luck. I mean, I truly mean that. I also want to recognize Jeremy Grant, who I think is going to be a very, very good player in the NBA, and is a lot different player than the player that I remember picking up at the airport in 2016, where he was kind of on the end of the bench in Philadelphia. I couldn't be more proud of his development and the person that he is becoming, and I think he's got a bright future, as I said earlier.